started. Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming on a beautiful night here, beautiful evening. I think for the format, we do have some slides, and I see Tobias has got a copy of them. There are not that many of them. There are maybe a dozen or so. Just provide some background information on the project, why we're here, and then hopefully after we can get through those slides in 20 minutes or so, and then we can take some questions and hopefully provide some answers if that works for everyone.
Maybe we start with some introductions.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Eric Stevens. I am the development engineer for Total Energies. I've been with the project for a number of years now. Primarily was part of the bidding and public RFP process and submitted a bid, and it has been since then ushering the project through various due diligence tasks and some of the discretionary permitting associated with the project, as well as interconnection.
Great, thanks, Eric. My name is Max Lamson. I'm with a company called TRC. We're an engineering and consulting firm. We do a lot of renewable energy projects, and we're working for Total Energies on this one. So we've prepared this plan set and some other supporting permitting documents, and basically just trying to support the project gets the entitlements, the deeds, and is designed according to the specifications.
And hi, I'm Izzy Mohammadi Hall. I also am from TRC, and I've kind of helped with the permitting and some of the outreach for the project. So.
Great. So we can jump in. We've got we'll jump in. So the name of the project, the official name of the project, is Solar Star Tranquility LLC, which is the name of the business entity under Total Energies. We're also sometimes calling it the Nantucket Solar Project, although we do know that there are other solar projects on the island, so we're getting more specific in our slide deck here. The location of the project is on the water company land, as probably many of you know, as kind of local people here, on 1 Milestone Road in Nantucket. The total area of that parcel is 48 acres, and the landowner is the town of Nantucket, and the water company is operating on it. And it is public water supply land that has obviously the well field and the pump house and the water building, etc. As Eric said, the project developer is Total Energies, which was formerly SunPower. You may see SunPower on some of the old documentation for the project, but it's the same company. Total bought SunPower a year ago?
Yes, 1 year ago.
Okay.
Yeah, acquired.
Yeah, acquired.
Right, yeah. Total Energies was the parent company of SunPower for a number of years, and then a year ago, Total acquired the C&I business unit within of SunPower.
And then why we're here tonight, Total Energies has filed a environmental notification form with the MEPA office. We'll get into the details on what triggered MEPA on a later slide, but there are public involvement requirements as part of MEPA, so that's part of the reason we're here. Oh, and that's just a locus map kind of showing where the project site is. As Eric mentioned, there's kind of a long history to this one. The town has been kind of a proponent of doing solar on town-owned land for, I guess, about 12 years now. So I might not get into all the details on the slide unless anyone wants to go back to it, but essentially the RFP that came out that Eric responded to in 2019 was for the development of solar at the subject property here. So that was the town essentially through town meeting voted to lease that land and make it available to a private solar developer. They issued the RFP in 2019. Total Energies, or then SunPower, is one of the respondents to that RFP, and they were awarded the project to build a ground-mounted solar project at the subject site. And that's really when the partner between Total Energies and the town kind of started on this project. Again, that's four years ago or so now. 2020 is a milestone because there was a lot of work done with the Nantucket Historic District Commission, the HDC, on conditions to kind of mitigate visual impacts to the site. So there's, they agreed upon like a 50-foot natural vegetative buffer along the rights of ways. So that's kind of existing trees and understory and everything's going to be maintained for a 50-foot setback from the roads in between the project and the roadways to create kind of a natural visual screening of the project. The December 2020, March 2021 is just some public presentations that Total made. So there has been a public involvement process all along, trying to solicit feedback and information from the town and the residents. And then 2021, there's some additional engagement with the Natural Heritage Program, Mass Wildlife, the Water Department, the Nantucket Land Bank, the DCR, Massachusetts DCR, and the town of Nantucket, basically looking at alternatives for the project, what kind of impacts there will be to habitat. We'll get into some details. There is habitat impact, looking at mitigation for that habitat impact, and kind of negotiating all that through the state agencies and making sure that there's essentially a viable project that and where all the impacts are mitigated and accounted for. So, sound better? Did I miss anything on this thing? Okay. Oh, there's a project website, which maybe you've seen. It's being maintained by the town, but we're trying to work with the town to make sure that's up to date, and we put information on there, like for this meeting and other updated plans and whatnot with the town. So existing conditions, there's obviously the water department and the facility, so there's cleared areas, a network of interior access roads. There's a water department building. There's some historic kind of buildings of historical infrastructure there from former operations. There's the pump house, and obviously the well field as well, and the wells. There are the site's surrounded by on two sides, actually, by Millstone Road and by Old South Road, and then on the east side is the bike path. This is an environmental kind of receptors map as well, and there are no wetlands or floodplains mapped on this site. It's primarily covered. The vegetated part of the land is primarily covered by scrub oak and pitch pine for habitat. And what's important about this map on the right, it shows the setback from the existing wells. So our project is going to maintain a 200-foot setback from the existing public water supply wells, which is kind of that interior amorphous kind of shape. And then the larger shape is a 400-foot setback. And again, a little more on existing conditions. Again, this is the pitch pine and scrub oak habitat, some cleared land, and then there's also more of a sole pitch pine habitat kind of on the north side along Milestone Road, and then
Small blueberry patch.
yeah, that little area number 4 is it was historically disturbed. Some blueberry took over that area, and there's some scrub oak there as well. And that's just a picture of kind of some of the vegetation on this site. And so this is getting into like what the actual project's going to look like. So Total Energies is proposing a 3.8 megawatt ground-mounted solar array, and it's going to be solar only. I know a lot of solar projects these days have a battery component to them. They looked at adding a battery, but they removed it, and again, in an effort to remove some of the impacts that would be related to the project. There are some habitat impacts, which is kind of what we're outlining here. There's going to be approximately 10 acres, 10.1 acres of the solar array that are going to be the actual modules themselves. That's kind of that blue shaded area. Then there's approximately 1.65 acres of shade buffer management area. So that's near the solar array where taller vegetation might shade the solar. So that needs to be kind of maintained, like trimmed or otherwise cut back, so that the solar is not shaded, because that would prevent the solar energy from being generated. And then there's the green hashed area, which is the visual setback that we discussed earlier. So that's essentially the natural vegetation that provides a screening from the project, from the public. So the total impact, including kind of the laydown area and the solar array and the managed vegetation areas, is approximately 13 acres of that total 48 acre site. And this is just a little more detail on what our site plan is going to look like. We do have kind of the most updated plans here too. And we've got one on a poster board here too, which might be a little more legible. But those are the rows of modules in blue. And then there's kind of a access road that comes around, a fence that secures the site. And then there's some electrical equipment also shown there, and how the project's going to be interconnected to the grid on the corner there. And I did want to just provide we just wanted to provide a typical kind of profile view of a typical ground-mounted solar array. So what's kind of nice about solar is that quite often you can use the existing topography and the existing grade of the land, and that's what we're intending to do for the most part at this site. It's pretty flat out there. So essentially you can install these ground screws as your foundation system. Again, it's kind of a direct drill or direct push technology. You're not disturbing a lot of the ground. And then you mount your racks and your modules on top of that foundation system. So, there are some temporary, impacts during construction, but really a lot of the vegetation kind of comes back, and you've got some natural ground cover often you can maintain. And again, you can maintain that natural topography and stormwater flow and a lot of the existing kind of features of the site, even after you're installing your solar. Yeah, I did want to highlight a few of the project benefits. The project would bring on-island clean energy generation for 25 or more years, which would reduce your dependence on imported power from the mainland through subsea transmission. There's an obviously peak energy demand for summer months, which is kind of the time of year when you're going to generate your most solar too. Like a day like today is a great day for solar generation. The sun's shining from early in the morning till late in the evening. This is consistent with the town of Nantucket's Beat the Peak initiative, which seeks to help resolve some of that demand, summer energy demand. It's on the website there below. It is essentially a power plant that is being constructed, but it operates passively with no emissions, no noise, no traffic or pollution. So obviously there's a little bit of noise impact during construction, but after construction, when it's operating for the 25-year lifespan, it operates pretty passively without those noise or emissions. The power is going to get net metering to the town of Nantucket, and the net savings is going to go to the town and the water company. There is mitigation funding that we're working on for the habitat that's going to be impacted, and that mitigation funding, we're working with the state to have that go to local habitat enhancement or conservation. There's the direct kind of environmental benefit. It should offset approximately 86,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions. It's essentially the carbon offset. And the project consistent with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts clean energy and climate objectives. So the MEPA, why we're here today, there are two MEPA triggers that we've identified during kind of the initial permitting process. The first one is the habitat taking, so that's the MEPA, that's the ENF rare species trigger, and that's the taking of endangered or threatened species habitat. And so that is the one that we triggered, and we're working with Mass Wildlife on a conservation management plan, which we have another slide with some more details on. The second threshold is environmental justice. There are environmental justice communities that are located adjacent to the site, and so that also triggered MEPA, and some of this additional public involvement process. There is a question of Article 97 as well, and we are currently actively working with MEPA office. They've got a whole land office that reviews things like Article 97, so we're working with them actively to confirm that Article 97 does not apply to the project or the site.
Can you tell us what the Article 97 is?
Oh yeah, sorry. That's essentially like a conservation restriction. So
dedicated to the protection of water supply lands.
So as I mentioned, we do have some ongoing state permitting, kind of based on those triggers. One is through the Mass Natural Heritage Program, and that's for the habitat that's being impacted. So as I mentioned, we're working on a conservation management permit, which will include a conservation management plan, which we're filing along with this kind of in parallel to this MEPA process. So there are two kind of state regulatory processes that we're working on in parallel. One with the MEPA office and then one with the Mass Heritage. And Total Energies has been working with Mass Wildlife and Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program for a couple of years now, trying to take a close look at that habitat, seeing exactly what that taking is going to be like, what mitigation would be required. And so we're kind of at the tail end of those discussions and at the point where we can file our permit application. Then the other permit that we're filing for, it's essentially like a certification that goes to Mass DEP, where if you're building solar on top of public water supply land, you just need to certify that the solar is not going to impact the public water supply. So again, that's a fairly straightforward filing, especially with this project that doesn't have a battery and it's kind of just solar. But that's another filing that goes to DEP, and the DEP reviews and confirms that there's going to be no impacts to the water supply. And Total Energies is working closely with the water department to get that certification. Oh, yeah, this map on the side just kind of depicts the groundwater protection zone and another depiction of the wells. So the habitat that we're talking about and the habitat that we're taking, it's actually the habitat of 6 different state-listed Lepidoptera, if I'm saying that right, but they're essentially moth and butterfly species. So we've got 2 of those species are listed as threatened and 4 are listed as a species of special concern. So none of those are actually listed as an endangered species, but they're still protected under the Mass program. Total Energies is working with the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program to file that conservation management permit and mitigate the impacts of the project and provide a long-term net benefit and conservation to the affected species. The proposed mitigation plan for the project will limit project impacts, incorporate habitat improvements, and it will include a decommissioning plan for the project, the plan to take the project down at the end of the life of the solar project, and then establish some off-site mitigation and conservation funding. And then Total Energies with the town and other groups are working with Natural Heritage to evaluate the possibility of on-site island mitigation options, like on-site conservation measures. So that seems to be going in the right direction as well. And then the other reason we triggered MEPA are these 6 minority census tracts that are located in the area of the project and actually overlapping the project. And so they're shown in the yellow area there. And that triggers some of this public involvement. So we are trying to reach out, working with the town to reach out. We've got the information on the website. We're putting out flyers and sending out emails. We're having obviously this in-person meeting to reach out to the public, and really following kind of the environmental justice guidance from MEPA and how to reach out through the MEPA guidelines. So this is part of that process. We're also doing continued outreach as the project progresses. So there's we're planning again updating the website, sending out emails to people who have expressed interest in the site or made comments on the site. As the project moves through the MEPA process, there'll be some additional studies that will be made available to the public as well. And then the next slide talks about some of the overall community impacts and benefits. So yeah, basically we're trying to, working with the town to mitigate any potential community impacts. The project size was reduced. Originally it was 4.7 megawatts and is reduced to 3.8 megawatts. Part of that was to increase the setbacks from the road, as we talked about, and maintain that visual screening. So we talked about remove the battery system from the project, which reduced some of the impacts of the project. I just mentioned the visual screening and the setbacks from right-of-ways. Setbacks from the wellheads, maintain that 200-foot no-build area. We're also comprehensively testing the actual equipment that's going on the site and making sure there's no toxicity related to the modules that are going to be placed on the site, so that there's no possibility of anything leaching into the ground. And then the site is secured from public access, so there are existing signage. The site's already secured, but there's also going to be a fence around the solar array as well. Again, just to kind of maintain safety and security related to the project. It's kind of a rough project schedule. Anything can happen kind of during the permitting process here, but we are kind of in the spring here working with the MEPA process and the ENF process. The summer, the MEPA process continues with what's called an environmental impact review, environmental impact report, and then ideally we get kind of our permitting in place and start construction later this fall. And those are our slides.
Just for the record, I support the concept of this. I have a question about the mitigation. You said you're trying to work out a way to do mitigation on island. Are you committed to that, or would you mitigate off island as a fallback?
Yeah, so we just had a good discussion with the state on that. I don't know if
Yeah, so there's a well-developed concept that is being discussed at the moment, in which the money will remain on island and will provide a vehicle for on-island conservation groups that do this work now to apply for funding for future activities.
That might or might not result in mitigation?
That the mitigation is to continue the work that's being conducted by various groups on island to date now.
Is there a deadline for that to be kind of ironclad?
Yeah, we believe that we'll have kind of pens down on that concept in the next couple months.
Okay, so the project wouldn't start until there was
Correct,
clear
yeah.
on-island mitigation?
The CMP needs to be basically submitted in its entirety, reviewed and approved in order for us to receive an approval to clear the land.
Just as a footnote, that you may want to do some public awareness on that issue alone, because this is the first we've heard of that. There's been a whole lot of chatter about all the mitigation taking place off island. So if that's not going to happen, that's a major, the fact that off island mitigation is off the table, it will be a major plus for the project.
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the default with natural heritage is that they assess the mitigation amount, and then you pay them the funds, and they decide kind of where it goes. That's the default process, right? So what we're looking at is a separate process that would allow that fund to those funds to be more directed.
Allow or require?
The documents that we're working on would essentially direct those funds here, yes.
Okay,
But-
and that's I think, pretty significant linchpin issue.
Right.
There's a precedent that it would set, obviously, for every project, want to mitigate off island, it's not kind of you can see where it's not headed.
I think, yeah, that's a good point, for sure, and I guess I think, just to clarify, I think this, the state would, the default would be the state would apply the funds where they think it would be, which could be off island, could be on island, but.
Okay, so it's
yeah.
not off the table?
No, I'm just saying that was, that's the default, that the state process is. The state process is not only doing stuff off island, I'm just saying.
I understand, but
The state is actively trying to create a first of a kind to allow for the money to stay on island. is a fairly well-baked concept to date. It is requiring some additional work, but things are looking extremely promising that is the avenue that this project will be taking.
Okay. And as far as the developer is concerned, that is a gating factor. I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm just trying to get clarity on it.
The permit is a gating factor. How the mechanics that go into resolving, getting alignment with the state, this is just one of the components to do so. Sure.
As an offshore energy coordinator, and I think I can speak for Mark Willett and myself, where mitigation money and spending it, keeping an island has always been paramount to us. And we have tried to explore every avenue to do that, and we believe we have a very good model to ensure that that does happen. We're lucky to have a community foundation in Nantucket well established here. There's a model in terms of the offshore wind mitigation fund that we're able to look to and model in terms of keeping mitigation money on island and a grant application process. So we're confident. It's not fully baked or approved yet, so we can't say too much about it.
Yep.
But I just want to reiterate that all of our attention and our priority is on keeping that mitigation money on island for local projects.
Got it. So I'm just trying, so does that, I just want to understand, does that, you know, it sounded like success in that, and I don't want to take up the whole meeting, but success in that process, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Am I understanding that if it's unsuccessful, the project doesn't happen?
I don't believe that's accurate, no.
Okay, so it's still an open issue.
We're working through it, yes.
Understood.
But
Okay.
we're actively, all collaboratively working towards keeping the
Understood.
money on island.
Understood, but it might not happen. And if it doesn't, the project would still go forward, is what you're saying.
That is a scenario, yes, but
Okay.
that's not what we're
I understand,
advocating.
no, I understand, but I just want to be, you know,
Yeah.
don't want us, any of us to misunderstand.
Yeah, it's a very dynamic situation, but we are actively trying to provide this benefit to stay on island.
And the state's involved too, like it's not, 100% the town's decision or Total Energy's decision.
I have a silly question. What size is the fencing? Like, can
What
like-
size?
Yeah, like can rabbits get in?
Yeah, so we.
Deer, like we want all the deer over there. Fence them in.
There's some over there.
So,
Deer feeders.
National Electrical Code has a code article that requires the facility to be fenced off by a 7-foot fence.
Okay.
We are actively raising the lower end of the fence, 6 inches to allow for little critters to come and go in and out of the array. And it's going to be a black vinyl coated fence to kind of assist with it blending in versus a conventional galvanized, gray metal fence. So we're taking some additional enhancements to the fence to kind of blend it into the environment.
I'd like to go back to the mitigation permit. It's my understanding that when this type of mitigation is required, that they're supposed to replicate what they're removing somewhere else in the environment, meaning on island. And that
Yeah.
there has not been a suitable place found to do it.
So there was a lengthy exercise in which we worked with the town, looking at the
Water tower area.
all of the owned lands. However, either these lands didn't have the needed habitat or was already in some sort of form of conservation that could not be reconserved. So that took about a year to get through, in collaboration with Jesse Leddick and the National Heritage Endangered Species Program. And ultimately, it got to the end that we did not have any inventory to enter into the conventional 2-to-1 offset land ratio there.
So why didn't that trigger looking for an alternate site, say on top of already capped landfills, which is a normal practice? That's land that, rather than disturbing critical habitat that cannot be replaced on the island, why not put these solar arrays on the roof of on the fire department and the police department? A lot of land, a lot of roof space up there.
Yeah,
Half cells, which is also town-owned land,
I
and
don't-
it's not gonna be disturbed.
Yeah, so Lauren has some feedback in regards to the landfill is not currently closed. And it has to be closed for X amount of years before an installation like this can actually be placed on top of it, through the post-closure use permits. The amount of area, that resides on rooftops doesn't get to a system-side value to create the amount of energy to create the millions of dollars of savings that this system will do.
But I do know, like, talking to some folks at the school, there's been a little resistance at times, from doing solar at the school, but I think that's something we should continue to be doing, advocating for more stuff on roofs in addition to this project.
So,
I can just clarify, so in 2019, when we did issue the procurement, it was for island-wide use properties. It was not just Wannacomet. It was a bundled procurement. We looked at the landfill, the airport, the fire station. The schools were included. Everything was evaluated that the town owned, managed, and this, we whittled down to this being the best for numerous reasons, either HGC constraints, engineering constraints on the roofs. I didn't know it, but the new fire station has a membrane roof that cannot be penetrated. It was also missed. SunPower won a bid in the end for 3 projects. One was the Surfside wastewater treatment plant, where we're about to complete the system with a local installer. We're really proud of that system, it's looking great. The second was a parking lot canopy at our fire station, which proved too costly in the end. And the third was this, for economies of scale, and we think it's a very efficient and compelling project because of the location, the co-use of space, and the fact that it did gain HDC approval after many concessions. But to say that we didn't look, the landfill is an active mining site, and there are PFAS concerns, there's stormwater concerns, there's flooding concerns. There is no other option. Do you have another idea? I can tell you why every other site is pulled out.
No, I'd like to hear that. How many other times in state history has this mitigation been resolved by writing a check?
I don't know the exact number, but this is a mechanism that is available through the regulations of the NISA workflow. It's not something that is granted easily. It takes years to get to that point. It's definitely not something that they provide as an option.
That they feel okay with
Readily.
this project to do it?
Well, this particular project has a lot of other aspects when it comes to trying to achieve energy, demand reduction of what's happening on this island. An indirect byproduct of this system, since it's connected to the grid and not coupled with load. So all the energy that is actually produced by this system is dispatched onto the local island grid infrastructure, meaning that the local load from an electron point of view, all the load around this vicinity is going to consume the power generated from this solar system prior to pulling that power from your 2 C4 cables. So the more energy that's produced on island is going to help provide energy as much as possible, try to get to energy independence, to defer that 3rd cable as much as possible.
Okay, so what about Article 97 here? It's your guys' position that this land is not protected by Article 97 unless transferred, and it's in the language of the transfer document that it's supposed to be preserved forever in its forever wild state?
For water purposes and uses, yes. This project is to offset Wannacomet Water's electrical load associated with water production.
And what happens if you need more wells on that property in the future? Some wells fail and then you can put in new wells and there's.
I believe there are carve-outs for future wells that have been taken into consideration.
Believe or you know?
Well, we have Mark here.
Mark, Wannacomet.
Okay,
Um,
so there's.
They're there. We have 2 open spots there. We just finished drilling a well on 43 North Pasture.
Right, that's one Jamie just put in?
Yep, that Jamie just put in. And we have 2 more spots that are carved out in that protected area.
And that's gonna take care of it forever, for the next 25 years?
It should, but if we keep building like we're building, what's gonna be less than 25 years, so.
Oh, that's a good question.
It should produce it. We have 2 spots permitted there, the 3rd one going at, North Pasture, and then we have access to the property we own off Lover's Lane, the state forest.
Right.
There's a chance to put 2 or 3 more in there as well.
Eric, can you speak about how the habitat will regenerate rather rapidly and then the decommissioning plans for restoring the site?
Correct. As a component of our conservation management plan, there's when the site rewilds itself, the early successional scrub oak habitat is the prime food for the species that are impacted. So there are ways that is actually by thinning the land to allow for that early succession to occur, which is going to be part of our CMP strategy in some of the shade buffer areas to help promote that substantive food for the species that are impacted. So once the system is decommissioned, there'll be an outreach that occurs again with the state to look at this deconstruction plan, the decommissioning plan, and how we're going to rewild this space.
Is it conservation, you mentioned, several different state level, interactions. Does the Conservation Commission locally have jurisdiction? And if so, I assume they do. And if so, what is their position then relative to the habitats?
I hate to pipe up, but I'm gonna get down to that one.
Sure.
I'm Vince Murphy, I'm the Sustainability Programs Manager at Local
Yeah,
Natural Resources in Ireland.
before,
Yeah, and for the Conservation Commission to have jurisdiction, there has to be wetland component.
Oh, okay.
No wetland component,
Yeah,
so.
right,
section
that's
there.
right. Okay, sorry. Thanks, Vince.
I have a question. What happens after 25 years? What environmental impact how do you recycle all these solar panels if they're useful like this 25 years?
That's not the useful life of these panels, right?
No, they have the potential of going farther.
Yeah, but they degrade, right? I mean, you wouldn't want 25-year-old panels.
Well, you know, in the industry standard right now is about, at year 25, produce about 85% their nameplate capacity. So there might be, depending on the technology.
I was gonna say, there may be new technology that.
Yeah,
that would be
you
more-
might still use the racking, but that's unknown, but, there's no reason to think why the panels would just be, for the most part, panels are in great condition.
Yeah.
in those later years.
So they would be probably ground up, and is there a plan?
No, there's like an EPA kind of oversight program that is dedicated to the recycling of solar modules. A lot of the components can get reused in other applications. So there's a whole organization that deals specifically with the recycling of these modules. It's nothing like we just take them off, bring them to the landfill and dump them in there. There's a regulatory process that is in place for these applications.
Because I did see on TV a woman who started a business, grinding them up and recycling. Okay, I don't know if she knows about the EPA. Do you know how much it would cost to decommission, and is that funding
Yeah,
guaranteed?
there's a bond that is put in
Okay.
place, yeah.
Great.
So even if there was to be, an event where Total doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah,
there's
that's what I'm
financial obligations that we put up front that secure that aspect at the end of the term.
Great. How long is the, construction expected to take from day one to
That's the
completion?
interesting thing, is that the construction of these systems actually happens quite fast.
I mean, from when they start clear cutting.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be most likely a 6 to 8 month process.
And where are the cables running?
The cables?
Yeah. Where are they connecting to the grid?
So the DC side of things will be buried pipe and wire, bringing all the DC power to the inverters that will be co-located in 2 locations. Since we have 2 subarrays, there's a pad associated with each one of these subarrays that will invert the power to AC. There's a medium voltage line that connects these 2 subarrays that ultimately will then transition to a power pole on 1 Milestone Road, and that's where the point of interconnection occurs.
So there isn't a lot of construction work to do off-site to get it connected to the grid.
There's 99% of this system is installed wholly inside 1 Milestone Road, with the exception of a small underground conduit leading up to that power pole on 1 Milestone Road, and it connects via the overhead line.
That's actually a little atypical too. Usually it's a series of riser poles, but putting it underground would be less visible. And
Yeah, I specifically wanted to comply with the aesthetics of the island as, has maintained for so long. So I've chosen the more expensive electrical route to comply with that aesthetic.
Where are the panels manufactured?
They are sitting in a warehouse for years right at this point. I believe they were manufactured in Mexico. They were assembled in Mexico.
For SunPower panels.
Correct.
One of the reasons we selected SunPower was they were the highest efficiency panels in the market.
And the technology hasn't changed in the amount of time they've been sitting in the warehouse, that there might be something better available now?
The leaps, well, these are specifically been allocated for additional ITC credits that these panels actually trigger that flow into the model and the economics of the project. So to secure the economics of the project, even though the installation was to happen a number of years into the future, we procured these and have been storing these offsite for a number of years, waiting for the construction of the project.
In kind of general terms of, solar efficiency has kind of been like I like to call it like a mountain plateau. It was really good in the beginning, but now we're just kind of like little incremental steps until the next, technology, which, isn't commercially available yet. And we might see in the next, within the next 10 years or so. But, over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been.
The major
percent-
leaps and bounds have occurred, yeah.
Yeah. Just little incremental changes over the last 5 years.
Modules that have more wattage have only physically gotten bigger to create that additional wattage per module.
And I guess this project does not legally trigger a quote change of use of the property?
That's our interpretation, since it's the benefit of the water company's load.
Does the lease have any provision for termination? I'm sure there are lease termination provisions, but in the event a superseding technology were to emerge, could the town buy out? Is there any provision for the town to pay a penalty to buy out, to terminate, or?
There are early termination evaluations, but we're hoping, say, in 10 years, the landfill may be available. That's what we're estimating at this point. We could probably look to a different location most likely. But whether
So it would be a
there-
negotiated termination of this lease, there's nothing like, again, and we were just chatting, there's a lot of talk emerging about the possibility of nuclear reemerging in the United States the way it is so popular in France and other places. Just as an example, if small power plants became popular and desirable here, how that would be
This would not be the
negotiable.
location.
Yeah. Maybe a sewer plant.
Who knows what the island will look like at that point in time, but,
Is a nuclear reactor on island something you would advocate for?
I mean, they're getting smaller and smaller, and a month ago, I would have said that.
Processor.
On top of the water supply.
As long as it's the size of a food
Yeah.
processor.
No,
If
I
anything, the
meant-
state has actually been going the other direction.
I know, but a
taking
month ago,
products off.
I would have thought that was an insane statement, but the
Yeah.
more I've learned about the evolution of that and the myth that surrounded nuclear,
Yeah.
it's, I mean, I always thought it was crazy, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
If anything, the state taking reactors like Plymouth offline has actually led to the energy crisis that the state
That's
has
my
been in the
point.
last couple of years,
Right.
because they never backfilled another generator source. So a lot of the power that does come into the Commonwealth is imported from
Right.
surrounding states,
Or
which is
Canada.
leading to really the highest electrical rates, I think, in the country for the most part. It's very, very high in Massachusetts.
it's something that National Grid I could see being interested in for the third cable. We're gonna require go-on generation every summer from here on out, which can be noisy. It's gonna be located downtown near Cannon Street. So I could see them perhaps investing in that sort of
Yeah.
distributed
Yeah.
generation.
I would encourage everybody to be open-minded about that, because it's, anyhow.
Yep.
We done?
We don't have to be. I'm happy to take any additional questions that can help provide any clarity about, what this project is, what it looks like, any other dimensional information.
Yeah, I couldn't see the height.
5'8" inches.
And if anybody wants to come walk out back, take a look, give me a shout, and we can check out the site.
Thank you,
We're
Mark.
also looking to have a ribbon cutting ceremony at the Surfside Bluff wastewater treatment plant to celebrate our first solar installation, which is also Total's energy contract, sometime in the summer, and we're looking forward to giving tours and educating more about solar at that time also.
I have one last question. I'm looking at your timeline here. When do you anticipate having this mitigation issue and finding out whether that money's really gonna stay on island or not resolved?
I believe over the next couple months.
Because you're talking about fall construction, so that is next couple of months.
Hopefully soon.
It'd be right after you get the resolved.
The town hired a consultant to help us with this. It is high priority.
Do you have to get building permits from the building department?
Yes.
Oh, yes. How long does that take? That was a pretty lengthy process.
Well, it's a town project, so.
So
We know
Tough
pretty
rules.
they might hopscotch over everyone else waiting in line?
In case you haven't noticed, the town is under different regulations than the rest of us.
Well-
Gathering this building that we're in.
I don't know precisely, but, the building department will prefer, this is a fairly technical project. So, I'm sure Total Energies has reached out to National Grid, and that, there's an application process to make sure interconnecting these things is done properly. And so the building department will refer to the engineers to make sure that, that's being integrated correctly.
And that work stream has been completed.
Does National Grid have to go to the select board like they always do about conduits and things
No, they
like
won't,
that?
because it's not going underneath anything, I don't believe so.
There's conduit on town-owned property.
Yeah, but it's not going underneath a public way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Having been a select board member.
There's a fairly regular and detailed conversation with National Grid about that handshake of work that needs to occur from our end, from the developer point of view, to where we actually interconnect to their infrastructure. We are, for the most part, responsible for a lot of the civil work associated with their equipment. So we will build all their concrete pads, their duct banks, their conduit runs, they will then simply come out and place their metering equipment, their protection equipment, and pull the wire and make determinations. But we prep everything for them.
And with the natural heritage issue, if they come back and say, we can't guarantee that this money's gonna stay on island, that really doesn't matter, you're gonna keep, if they say it's okay, you guys to write the check, we'll take the check, but we're gonna put it where we want it, project's still going forward, right?
That is a possibility, but not what we're
Would you
working
stop, would
on.
you stop the project if it said the money's not guaranteed to stay on island?
My goal is to provide the benefit to the town as we've described, which is to install the system and provide millions of dollars of savings on electrical costs. The couple $100,000 or whatever this value is that we'll be paying for this mitigation funds is a very small percentage of the multiples of millions of dollars that the generator will actually save the town.
I
So
don't like the
these two buckets of money are vastly different.
I don't like the precedent that it sets because, you know, it tells other developers that might be looking at a place that they normally wouldn't even look at to say next time they're out of safe harbor and somebody wants to
Well-
build a 40B that they might be able to pay for play.
Well, I can say that, Nantucket is a leader in conservation. We sit here today with more than 50% of the island in one form or another of conservation. My goal is to help Nantucket with their energy needs.
If I could just add, the mitigation fund agreement model we're working on in tandem with the Land Bank and Conservation Foundation, and as Jesse Weddick and NHESP gives a lot of deference to the on-island conservation organizations. If this plan is approved and we can set up this model, which is everyone's goal, it will provide an avenue to collect the fee in lieu that the Surfside Crossing project is assessed and has to pay. So not only will this have seed funding, we will then be able to get that $700,000 from that project. The reality is the island is out of land to put into conservation. We are losing land, and it's not the best option, but it allows worthwhile projects to move forward. I don't think that reason would be reason enough to kill this project. But we are working, it is our top priority at the moment to set up that model.
And there's been discussions with the land council also. Where are those
Yeah.
talks?
The land council part of that little coalition you just mentioned.
They are not.
Is there a reason why?
I believe there is a reason.
Have they been asked to participate?
I can't answer that.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any motion in here?
I'm Lauren Sinatra, energy
Thanks, Mike.
coordinator.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Surf's up, everybody. Take it easy, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, see you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. I kind of want to say, do you know
Is,
where you?
are we terminating the recording?
Oh, no, not yet.
Point.
Oh, yeah.